Hi, I'm Atamanchuk, the Fire Marshal of the County Grande Prairie Fire Service. Today, we're going to look at how to properly check a fire extinguisher. There's 5 steps to check. Let's start with the first step. The first step is to make sure we have a proper label on this fire extinguisher. It does 2 things for us. It tells us what type of fire extinguisher this is, and it also gives us the steps on how to use a fire extinguisher. So let's ensure that this label is in place. Step 2, the pin. Very important to have this pin in place. If I did not have this pin in place and I were to pick the handle and squeeze it, all the product in this extinguisher will go all over the ground, and we don't want that to happen. So let's make sure this pin's in place and secured in place with a zip tie. Number 3, the gauge. We want to make sure that the gauge is in the proper position. In this case here, it is in a green position. That is exactly what we want to see. If it was not in that position, we would have to take it in to get looked at by a proper technician. 4, our hose. Very important, because when we squeeze our trigger, this is where the product comes out. So let's make sure the hose is secured in place. I have no cuts or cracks in the hose, and of course the end is clear. And in this case, the hose is perfectly fine. And lastly, of course, is the exterior of the extinguisher. Let's make sure there's no dents to it, bangs on it, because if we see any physical damage to our fire extinguisher, we need to take it in to our technician to make sure it's safe for us to use. So let's recap our steps. Let's make sure our label's in place. Let's make sure our pin's in place and secured. Let's make sure our gauge is in a green position. Let's make sure our hose is completely fine and working condition. And lastly, let's make sure our fire extinguisher has no physical damage to it. In this case, we're ready to go with the extinguisher, and thank you very much for your time, and be safe.